The world is watching a stretch of water where ancient trade routes meet modern military might, the South China Sea. This region, long a crossroads of commerce and culture, is now a stage for high-stakes geopolitical drama. Every day, thousands of ships pass through these waters, carrying goods that fuel the global economy, making this sea one of the most vital arteries of international trade. On the surface, fishing boats and cargo ships crisscross, weaving a tapestry of daily life and commerce. But beneath this routine, tension simmers, an undercurrent pulling nations toward confrontation, as each tries to assert its claim and protect its interests. The stakes are global. A single misstep here could shake international peace and security, sending shockwaves far beyond Asia. World leaders and diplomats watch anxiously, aware that the consequences of conflict would be felt everywhere. This is no longer a regional dispute, it's a flashpoint where China's ambitions collide with the US-led order. The presence of powerful navies signals that the balance of power in Asia and perhaps the world is at stake. Escalation is rapid. Confrontations are more frequent and brazen, with each side testing the other's resolve and readiness. Filipino fishing crews now face Chinese Coast Guard vessels using water cannons and dangerous maneuvers. For these fishermen, the sea is both a livelihood and a battleground where every journey carries new risks. These are calculated acts of intimidation, not peaceful negotiation. Each incident raises the stakes, making compromise seem ever more distant. China claims nearly the entire sea, marked by its controversial 10-dash line, while the Philippines and Vietnam push back, determined to defend their own sovereignty and rights to the resources beneath the waves. The US, bound by treaty to defend its allies, stands watch to keep these waters open. American warships patrol alongside partners, signaling commitment to freedom of navigation and regional stability. The world holds its breath. What happens here could define the future of global power and peace. Markets, governments, and ordinary people everywhere are watching, aware that the next chapter could change everything. To understand this crisis, we need to see how we got here, what's happening now, and what the future might hold. Only by looking at the past and present can we grasp the true scale of the challenges ahead. The South China Sea is the planet's economic superhighway, a vast expanse of water that connects the world's most dynamic economies. Stretching from the shores of China to the coasts of Southeast Asia, it is a lifeline for global commerce and prosperity. Nearly a quarter of global maritime trade, trillions of dollars in goods, energy, and raw materials, passes through these waters each year. Every day, thousands of ships navigate these crowded lanes, carrying everything from electronics and cars to oil and grain. Any disruption here would send shockwaves through the global economy, causing shortages, price spikes, and uncertainty in markets worldwide. The world's supply chains depend on the uninterrupted flow of traffic through this critical corridor. Beneath the waves lie vast reserves of oil and natural gas, making control of the sea a strategic prize. These resources are crucial for the energy security of many nations, fueling industries and homes across Asia. The competition for energy and resources intensifies the conflict as countries vie for access to these lucrative deposits. Tensions flare as rival ships patrol the same waters, each asserting their claims. For millions in Southeast Asia, these waters are a vital source of food and livelihood. Generations of families depend on fishing, and the sea sustains entire communities along its shores. Chinese fishing fleets, often escorted by armed vessels, are depleting fish stocks and sparking confrontations. These disputes threaten not just the environment, but the survival of local fishermen. The South China Sea is also a military choke point. Control here means power over global trade and security. Whoever dominates these waters can influence the movement of navies and commercial fleets alike. That's why the US, Japan, Australia, and others are so invested. They see China's actions as a direct challenge to open seas and global stability. The presence of foreign navies underscores the high stakes and the risk of escalation. The stakes are economic, strategic, and deeply personal for those who depend on these waters. For the people living along its shores, the South China Sea is not just a map on the news, it's home, heritage, and hope for the future. China's strategy is to create facts on the water. Over the past decade, it has built artificial islands, turning reefs into military outposts with runways, ports, and missile systems. These bases project Chinese power far from its coast. In 2023, China updated its maps, adding a 10th dash to its claim, overlapping the exclusive economic zones of its neighbors. Beijing insists on historical rights, but to others, it's a modern maritime land grab. Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia aggressively patrol, harassing rivals and raising flags on disputed features. These are gray zone tactics, hostile actions calibrated to avoid outright war. The goal? Change the status quo without triggering a military response from the Philippines or the US. By pushing boundaries and creating constant risk, China aims to wear down resistance and win without firing a shot. It's a strategy that's difficult to counter and keeps the region on edge. The U.S. response to rising tensions in the South China Sea is anchored in its network of alliances, with the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty with the Philippines standing as a cornerstone. This historic agreement, forged in the aftermath of World War II, was designed to ensure that both nations would stand together in the face of external aggression, and it remains a powerful symbol of American commitment to regional security. Washington consistently insists on peaceful dispute resolution and the protection of freedom of navigation in these contested waters. Yet, it goes further, publicly promising military support if Filipino forces or public vessels come under attack, making clear that the U.S. is prepared to back up its words with action if necessary. This ironclad commitment is meant to deter escalation and reassure allies that the U.S. will not waver in a crisis. To reinforce this stance, the U.S. Navy regularly conducts freedom of navigation operations, sending warships through contested waters to challenge China's sweeping territorial claims and demonstrate that international law still matters. These high-profile missions send a clear signal of resolve, not just to China, but also to U.S. allies and partners across the region, showing that America is present and engaged. Joint military exercises like the massive Balikatan drills further strengthen U.S.-Philippine cooperation and readiness, building trust and interoperability between their armed forces. Beyond the Philippines, the U.S. is also deepening security ties with other Southeast Asian nations, providing training, equipment, and strategic support to bolster regional defenses. But America's resources are stretched. Recent strikes against Iran and ongoing commitments in Europe and the Middle East have raised concerns about divided attention and the risk of overextension. Asian allies worry that Washington could be distracted, creating a window for China to test U.S. resolve and potentially alter the status quo in the region. This makes the American promise more critical and more difficult to uphold, as every move is closely watched by both friends and rivals. The U.S. must carefully balance its global commitments while continually reassuring partners in Asia that it will not abandon them in times of crisis. The credibility of its deterrence is under constant scrutiny, with every action and statement analyzed for signs of strength or weakness. The region is watching closely. Will the U.S. stand firm, or will distractions elsewhere weaken its resolve and embolden its rivals? The answer could shape not only the future balance of power in Asia, but also the credibility of American leadership on the world stage for years to come. The South China Sea crisis is drawing in nations across the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Japan, facing its own disputes with China, is boosting defense spending and deepening alliances. The Philippines, under President Marcos Jr., is pushing back against Beijing and diversifying its security partnerships. Manila is strengthening ties with South Korea, the EU and ASEAN members, seeking broader support. Australia, Vietnam, and even European powers are increasing their presence, underscoring the global stakes. ASEAN struggles to form a unified stance, so countries turn to smaller, flexible partnerships. This web of alliances is making the strategic environment more complex and unpredictable. The region is uniting, but the path forward remains uncertain. In 2013, the Philippines challenged China at an international tribunal under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The 2016 ruling was a sweeping victory for Manila. China's claims had no legal basis, and its actions violated Philippine rights. The US and Western nations hailed the decision as a win for the rules-based order. China rejected the ruling, dismissed it as waste paper, and doubled down on its activities. The tribunal's decision has no enforcement mechanism. There's no global police to compel compliance. This exposes the limits of international law when a powerful nation refuses to play by the rules. The Philippines and its allies hold a moral and legal victory, but it's practically unenforceable. The standoff highlights a global dilemma, the clash between the rule of law and the law of power. In the South China Sea, might is making right. The greatest danger isn't all-out war, it's a small incident spiraling out of control. The sea is crowded with Chinese, Filipino, Vietnamese, and American ships, raising the risk of collision or miscalculation. China's gray zone tactics, using Coast Guard and militia, not Navy, create deliberate ambiguity. Is a water cannon attack an act of war or law enforcement? The uncertainty paralyzes decision-makers. Each confrontation, like the water cannon assaults on Philippine supply missions, is a test of will. China aims to make resupply so dangerous that the Philippines abandons its outposts. The US has clarified that a fatal incident could trigger its defense treaty. The region stands on a precipice. One wrong move could force escalation. The gray zone is shrinking and the red line is getting closer every day. The world watches, hoping to avoid a spark that could ignite a wider conflict. The Indo-Pacific security is shaped by global events. US military action against Iran has forced Washington to divert resources, raising fears of distraction. Beijing sees opportunity. If America is preoccupied, China may act more assertively in its backyard. This perception increases the risk of miscalculation. At the Shangri-La Dialogue, the US urged Asian allies to boost defense spending and share the security burden. Allies can no longer rely solely on the US to police the region. The Philippines is building a network of partners, Japan, Australia, South Korea, and Europe, to hedge against uncertainty. Collective security is now seen as essential insurance. In a turbulent world, having more friends is the best way to survive. The region is adapting, but the risks are higher than ever. The future of the South China Sea is perilous. China shows no sign of backing down. The Philippines and its allies are more determined than ever. The risk of a direct military clash is growing. One possible outcome, a frozen conflict, with tense standoffs and periodic crises becoming the new normal. Another, more hopeful path would require real diplomacy and compromise, still a distant hope. Nationalism and mistrust make negotiation difficult. The fate of the sea rests on choices in Beijing, Washington, and Manila. A single incident could ignite a conflict no one wants. The world watches, hoping for de-escalation but bracing for the worst. The waters are choppy, the course ahead dangerously uncharted.